Witam Państwa serdecznie, Błażej Hrabkowicz, to jest EnergaCAMERIMAGE w Toruniu, and our guests are actor Joel Edgerton. Hello, Joel.
Hello.
And Adolpho Veloso, cinematographer. Hello.
Hello.
How are you? Enjoying CAMERIMAGE in Torun?
I just arrived, but yeah.
Well, hopefully that will stay that way.
Yes.
Hopefully. We're talking, of course, about train dreams, and I want to ask you, Joel, firstly, about the sort of acting challenge of playing a character who remains silent for a lot of the movie.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of dialogue to actually build this character. You had to use another tool. So can you tell me a bit more about that? What a task that it was? Yeah.
Well, I think on one hand, I think we have such a good director who's telling a story with a real confident hand and very intentionally letting these moments of
Clint
life.
Bentley.
Yeah, Clint Bentley. And also going back to the script of Clint with Greg Quidar writing the script, these layers of a very, the exposure of an entire life, but the selection of moments and the experiences that my character goes through, I think are very universal human experiences. And for that reason, on one hand, I feel like Robert becomes kind of a blank canvas for the audience to paint their own experience onto, or a reflection of
to project themselves onto.
Yeah, or to see something of themselves in there, of the ideas of the struggles around work versus family, of falling in love, of being a parent and being nervous about what kind of a parent you are, and then of course
well-being of a child, of course. Yeah.
Well-being of a child, and then depending on how late in life, and sometimes it's early in life or late in life, we will all experience some version of grief or loss.
Sure.
And these are all things that I think an audience has experience of. I certainly have experience of most of these things. So I could trust myself as a performer, as an actor, that Adolpho can find that inside me because I could be honest about it. And Clint, can trust that I'll do the right thing in the journey, and the audience participates in saying, I understand this guy, understand what he's going through, that I don't need to express it too much with words.
Adolpho, in that kind of movie where Joel is acting mainly, without words, without dialogue, how important was for you, for your work as a cinematographer, to actually capture that performance, to actually help with your camera work for us as the audience to understand this character and feel his emotions?
Well, it was easy. I mean, when you have a good actor, it's easy, and I feel like Joe has something so special that he does very well, and I've seen that not so many times, which is really giving all the emotions and translating so many things into an image without having to say anything. And when he says things, it's also amazing, obviously, but like it was so important for this this movie to have someone like that, and I feel like he just do an amazing job. So it was kind of easy to just capture that, and I feel like we didn't really have to lead it. We just were following it, So I was not leading him with the camera to get something. I was just following to capture what he was giving to us.
Mm.
And I will say, interestingly, that I think one of the traps we all could have fallen into, Clint as a director, myself as an actor, and Adolpho, is to presume then that the film has to entirely live in close-ups.
Sure.
To go, if there's no words, but it's interesting how we with the spaces we're in, that body language is as powerful sometimes as an expression, because of not just the work, but how emotion can affect the shape of a body or the way a person walks. So I felt confident that whichever size of the frame that was there, we could convey these things without having to, say too much.
Yeah, Adolpho, Joel touched on a very interesting thing because, yeah, there could be a temptation to go really close because we don't have too much of dialogue. Was keeping the frame wide for a lot of time and using this kind of space around Joel. I guess that was a conscious decision on your part and the director's part.
Totally. Early on, we saw a bunch of pictures that Dorothea Lange took during the Great Depression in the US. And it was amazing for us how she could capture that, always having a lot of the environment and about the places those characters were during what they were living. So those pictures are really beautiful, even though they're pictures from a very depressing moment and chaotic. And I feel like you could understand everything, not just by their emotions, those people's emotions, but because you understand where they were. And I feel like that's the same thing for us. Like, I feel like most of the time we wanted to convey what the character was feeling also through what was happening around him, and nature playing a huge part on this movie, not just because of everything bad that happens, but also the good things and how impactful those things were to Robert. And I feel like having a wider frame and having a lot of space around our characters could help us understand what they were going through.
Mm-hmm. Joel, when I was watching the film, I had the impression that a lot of what's going on visually is very poetic, and your actually performance and this very human, real emotions Robert, your character, feels, is also meant to ground us as viewers in this very, poetic landscape, ground us with something real and raw. Did you have a similar view on that when, working on the film, reading the script?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few moments visually where I feel like, from Robert's point of view, it's something quite practical, and yet for the audience, it's something quite poetic. For example, there's a moment where Robert walks up to these two very large trees that are side by side, and I go and just touch the tree. For me, that was one thing, but for an audience, I think it's another thing. And even in the moment when I watch the film, I read into this about the relationship, that somehow these two trees are symbolic, for me, just of Gladys and Katie, and that's interesting when you take some of the words away, and the narration even is a little pared back. It allows you to go, oh, for me it's this, and for you it might be something completely different. But so I liked Robert's practical approach to life, even when characters like Claire are talking about the world being intricately stitched together, and the dead tree being as important as the living one, and Aunt, William Macy talking about it hurts a man's soul. That Robert's listening to these things kind of, not like a child, but from a more naive place. Like, they're not thoughts he would have, but they're thoughts he finds interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, I laughed a bit when you said William H. Macy's name, because it's a brilliant performance. I mean, he's not in a movie for a lot, but he really makes that count.
He's brilliant.
He's one of the greatest actors, in my opinion. Adolpho, from a visual standpoint, but also kind of from a philosophical standpoint, in this film, you have a film of contrasts, but really they're not contrasts, but the things that make the life and the picture whole. Like, the life is cruel and beautiful at the same time. That what we see in the film is beautiful and poetic and very real, very violent even at the same time. Were those contrasts also what guided you and the director Clint Bentley in your visual work?
Totally, and I think fire being maybe the most important of them, and a good metaphor for that. Like, I feel fire is, I mean, you see for like more than an hour in the movie, for the first part of the movie, you see how much fire is important on their lives. Fire is what gives them light, heat, how you warm your food, etc. So
keeps them alive, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, we need fire, and fire can be so beautiful and hypnotic, but also at the same time, you get to a scene where you see how fire can actually be bad and
destructive force also.
Destructive. And I feel like those two sides of the same element in the movie and how important it is and how dangerous it can be were really important for us to show. And also its effects and also what we're doing with it, because it totally also depends on us. So I feel like the conversation was always about, with the fire, for example, if you want to show how fire has these two sides, let's use real fire. We don't want to like give an impression of what fire could have been. Let's shoot this with just real fire, real candles, real campfires, real gas lamps, and etc. So you actually see fire before you then see a bigger fire.
Joel, you said that Robert, your character, is a practical man, but also we see him in a movie a lot of times by himself in a quite of reflective mood. He's also someone who observes very closely the world around him. And given that, how important for you as an actor were these scenes where you actually interacted with other actors? Did they, in your opinion, give another dimension to this character?
You know, it says a lot that Robert is, you know, retreats from the world and isolates himself, because that period of silence means that when I interact with Claire, for example, Kerry Condon's character, that this meeting of the friend you didn't know you needed elicits finally this information, and we finally hear Robert talk maybe for the most length of time in the whole film. And we realise that not just that he has sorrow about his loss, but that he feels somehow responsible for not being there when things happen, you know. And I think this sort of idea of being a hermit versus being in the world is interesting, because I think the film itself talks about regrowth and rebuilding in a way for me. And part of rebuilding and regrowing, I think, is the beautiful core nature of humans, is that, you know, we can communicate with each other, and therefore we can, like fire can be a beautiful thing and just destructive, we can be destructive to each other, but we can also
uplift each other.
Yeah, and I think that's so powerful. So Robert's retreating from the world, and then finding a friend, or having Ignatius Jack as just a simple offering of food and saying, I'm just checking up on you. I think it's a reminder of the good sides of being with other people, being in a community.
Sure. Adolpho, one more thing. When I saw the images of Joel and Felicity Jones, their characters pictured in a white frame, in a beautiful landscape, I couldn't help but think about Days of Heaven by Terrence Malick. Was Terrence Malick work some kind of conscious point of reference for you or the director, or maybe it just seeped in subconsciously?
Not as a direct influence. I feel like both for me and Clint, we love Malick's work, so I feel like in deep down in our brains that it's imprinted somehow. But it wasn't something we discussed for this movie. We were actually talking about Tarkovsky a lot.
Oh, right.
Yeah, like Mirror and Sacrifice and even Stalker. So those were like kind of the things we discussed the most. But I feel like, yeah, when you love something, maybe that's there somehow.
But you did discuss those directors in visual sense, like the composing the frame, the inspiration for that? Tarkovsky,
yes.
Yeah.
Especially like with movies like Mirror and Sacrifice, you have like the relationship with like a place, a house, and the cabin and the fire. So I feel like all those movies have basically a scene where a house catch on fire, basically.
Yes.
We did talk a lot about that, and in the end, I feel like the things we ended up using the most were just what we had and the script, and going back to pictures from the time and watching footage from that time to try to be as accurate as possible to the story we had, instead of trying to necessarily mimicking something else.
All right. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.